just let me see with our dogs. Hello, it's Susie Walker here, and here we are with Bertie the dog, first of all, interviewing Danusia Malina-Derben. Hello, Danusia, and who have you got with you?
Hi.
Hello, who's that?
And this is Dickie the Dachshund, Dickie Vander's sausage.
Oh, look at that. Look, Bertie, look how cute he is. So how long have you had Dickie, Danusia?
Dickie has been, well, he came to us a few weeks old, and he's just over a year. So yeah, a year. And he's a very lovely boy, but he's very excited. Well, he was excited about meeting Bertie. He's gone all,
Gone a bit shy now. I know.
Yeah.
So Bertie's the new. Let's have a look. He's the new dog at Psychologies. We lost our beautiful office dog Oscar at the beginning of the year, and I have been bereft. And then I had the opportunity to adopt the lovely Bertie. But anyway, we're not here to talk about dogs. We're here to talk about podcasts, Danusia. So just let me introduce the wonderful Danusia. If you don't know who Danusia is an entrepreneur, a business expert, and podcast host of, what do we call it? School for Mothers, which has been the #1 Apple business podcast in the UK. The other thing you need to know about Danusia is she's also mother of 10 children. She runs a business. She's successful. But today we're going to be talking about podcasts. And so our dossier this month is all about how to run an online business. Many of us as women are looking for new ways to work and own our own businesses rather than working for someone else. Danusia, you know all about that. But first of all, if we've got an idea for a podcast, why is it a good idea to have a podcast, and where do we start?
Well, I mean, as most of us will know, podcasts have exploded. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of podcasts now, and I think they've been around for about 15 years. But that will have been the very first pioneers that broke with those. And I guess, I mean, one of the reasons to have one is actually isn't just to jump on the bandwagon. I think it's really important to get clear whether this is a vehicle and a format for you, because I think it's ever so tempting to think, oh my goodness, everyone's got a podcast. I better just get a podcast. And first thing to know is it's really hard work. Sorry, listeners. I mean, it's not something just like whip off, like, here's another 5 episodes. No. Talk to anybody that's running a consistent, is host of a consistent podcast. And there's lots of work. I was talking to somebody the other day Sarah Peck at Startup Pregnant podcast. She's been going for 3 years, very, very successful US podcast. And she said she puts in 8 hours research for 1 episode. Now, wow. I mean, I was going to drop off my chair because I said, oh my God, I mean, Sarah, that's huge. I haven't got the time for that.
It is, yeah. It really is, yeah.
So I don't do that. Of course I don't. She reads every guest book. She's forensic about it. And I love Sarah for that, because her podcast is extraordinary. And I don't have time for that. You mentioned the kids. I run a consultancy. I couldn't do that. So what's the benefits of having a podcast? Well, for a start, it's the most phenomenal networking you can do. Yeah, you meet, if you've got an interview-based, conversation-based podcast, then it's extraordinary for meeting people and putting out something that you care about. And I think we'll probably come back to that about, well, what would you do it on? Why? How do you choose that? Yeah. But really, also, one of the things that I found is it's wonderful for building confidence. It's
building confidence. Okay.
Building confidence. Women's voices are needed. 80% of podcasts are hosted by men. 80%.
Is that true? Oh my goodness. Girls, come on.
Yes. Get yourselves out there with the podcast. Yeah, we need our voices. We need people who identify as women. You need to get out there and get a podcast. But it may be that you need to look at, here's what I need to do. Here's what I want to put out into the world, whatever that is. It might be about hot yoga. It might be about, I don't know, dahlias. No, it doesn't have to be. There's so many podcasts. It could be a crime podcast. It could be an interview one. But the thing is it right for the podcast format? Or is it actually a blog? Because blogs are still very powerful, as we know. So don't make yourself hard work without thinking about, is this the right medium through which to put this material out? Which leads me to, what you're going to do it on. What are you, because
yes.
I do a lot of research about podcasts because I track podcast trends. And I've got that kind of research brain anyway, being an ex-academic. So I like to look at patterns and habits. And that's how I came across 80% being female-based. And as I look at podcasting, you start to realize that so many people start podcasts, and then about 3 months in, they realize, holy hell, this is hard. This is really tough. So you'll see a tail that they just like disappear. And actually, podcasting isn't a fast win. You need to just pace. So the most important thing about pacing is pick something that is so important to you. That's where to start. A podcast is it stands for your values. What do you believe in? Do you want to entertain people? Do you want to have a laugh? Do you want a conversation that's gritty or funny or poignant? Or what is it that you stand for? What are you about? What do you get angry about? What do what's missing in the world and you think, that's for me? Nobody's talking about marbles and the not that I would talk about marbles, but I have a jar of marbles in my
I just lose mine.
They're gorgeous. But, or the thatching of cottages, the decimation of the thatching industry. Now, I live in the country and I see thatched cottages, and I know there aren't many people left with those skills. Now, they've got an opportunity to niche right in, because the more niche we get, the better. Because
when you talk about the kind of finding your passion, is there anything, because often, people think, well, I'm kind of passionate about lots of things, but what is the one thing that I could, really, so I always say, find your rant, as you say, it's like when you perhaps had too much wine and you start ranting and all your friends roll their eyes, what are you ranting about? What is the exercise that you could give to people to say, what's your rant? What's the thing that you could just go on? I mean, my brother is talking about niching. He's a chimney sweep, and but he talks about fires. He used to talk about fires all the time. He was an engineer, and everyone would just glaze over. He would just talk about the fire, and he's just found the perfect profession for him. He really has. He puts in, wood burning stoves, and I think, oh my God, that would make a great podcast for all those people who love, fires. But so, how do you really drill down and really identify what that is? As you say, it's your voice, it's your passion, but is there something good that we can say it's that is it?
Yeah, there's two things that you can do. One is reach out to 20 people that know you and ask them, what do I bore the pants off about? What do I actually go on about that you can predictably say, oh, that's Susie, she always says this. If there's a conversation, Susie will say, oh, have you thought about the feminist angle? Or have you thought about, or your brother, oh, well, of course the fires, because what he'll do is he'll bring fires into anything, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. He really does. Bless you, Nick. He really does.
For being our example. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, what do you find so natural to you? What is so natural that it isn't work? It's just not work. Because if you're going to really immerse yourself in this, which a podcast is, you have to have that resilience to keep going, that longevity of interest.
Yeah.
Because you and I know that we might pick up a camera or you know, have tried some kind of craft that we think, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And about 5 weeks in, we think, I am done with this. Now imagine that is what happens in podcasting. People make a flurry, they realize, okay, well, we can get over the tech issues. There are some tech things to get, you know, squared away. But that's obvious that you can find that information. But then what you can't pretend and fake is interest. You just can't. So it's got to be something that's so in your DNA that you could go on and on and on. So that
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's that thing that you do when you're in your spare time. So, I mean, it's call me sad, but I will read self-development books in my spare time, and I get hooked by them. I read them constantly. It's what I love doing. I enjoy looking at the inner world. I read psychology magazines. That's what I do, and that's my job. So I love it. I just absolutely love it.
Yeah, actually, incredible, isn't it? It's such an integration of who you are, what you stand for, what you want to surround yourself with. And so how awkward it would be to start a podcast about something, have to talk with people or talk on a subject that you've gone off the boil about. Like School for Mothers podcast and School for Fathers podcast isn't about parenting. I'm like, if I had to talk about parenting, no thanks very much. It's quite the opposite. It's a thought leadership. Their thought leadership podcast. So there's the other thing. What do you want to offer? Do you want this lightness? Is it entertainment? Think television. What genre is it in? Is it factual, documentary style? Is it riffs of solo episodes? I mean, lots of people do solos.
Yeah.
It means that you have to have a lot to say, which is fantastic. Women, get out there, get those voices out there. But find what it is that consistently you can find lots of angles to talk about.
Yeah. So I think maybe again, if you had an A3 piece of paper and you managed to fill it with ideas, you're probably on the right track.
Well,
so let's So let's say that you've got your idea and you think, yes, this is it. I've filled my sheet. This is the thing that I'm interested in. Then what? What do we do with our idea then? How do we develop the idea, or do we get the tech help? For me, it's always the tech that drives me nuts. When people are first starting, how do they learn how to do it all?
Well, we're really, really lucky that the tech help is so online. I mean, it's, if you just go onto forums anywhere, I mean, certainly we looked around at the tech. I was completely clueless. We had zero budget, zero experience, zero kit, zero guests. I mean, zero listeners. I mean, I started with absolutely, nothing, and had to just glean and start with, well, how is this sounding? I have very high expectations. So I wanted to, so again, it's, what are you asking of yourself? Go back to yourself. Like, who am I? Who am I? Am I someone that wants this quick, easy? Or am I, and it could be, am I somebody that expects this to sound really professional? So that means I will know where I need to go to get this information. Now, I'm not suggesting people necessarily go out looking for it to be amateur, but is this a side hustle? Is this a monetization piece? Where does this sit in your life? Where does it sit in your business? Get clear, because then you'll know what kind of investment. I'm talking time, getting the resources, money. So, there are podcasts that are massively monetized. Ours is monetized. And
what do you mean by that? Explain what you mean by that.
Monetized is where you earn money through it.
But sponsorship, or should people buy it? How do you do it?
Most podcasts are free. Most podcasts are free. So you can go on to Apple, Amazon, Spotify, all the places that you can find podcasts. And you don't have to pay to listen to them. Yeah, you really don't have to do that. Some are going behind paywalls, so that you do, and some offer bonus material behind a paywall. Depends.
Yeah.
And some are exclusive. So, for instance, Brené's is exclusive to Spotify because she's done a big deal. Yeah. So
Yes.
the world of podcasting is changing in that sense. But basically, what I mean by monetized is whether there are adverts. Do you want to, produce a podcast with adverts through it? Because companies will pay for adverts. But why will they pay for adverts? They'll pay for adverts if you've got listeners. So if you have, Auntie Jane listening in Hull, hello Auntie Jane, I don't have Auntie Jane, but I'm sure there is one there, then, they're not going to say, yay, we'd love to give you hundreds of pounds for you to put an advert about our company on your podcast.
Yes.
They're not going to do
Yeah.
it. You have
Yeah.
to have an audience, yeah? So gather your audience, you need that. And then, of course, there's sponsorship. Simply mentioning, so a partnership, mentioning that, we had one with The Week, the magazine, The Week for children, and The Week Junior. So both those. And that was fantastic because it's a really good fit for our audience. We already know that. So again, actually, before you think about your tech, think about who your target audience are. Who is going to listen to this? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, hot yoga, how hot yoga, for instance, a podcast on how hot yoga helps with anxiety is very niche. It's going to be anxious people who identify as feeling anxious, who want a solution, and it's hot yoga, not yoga. So that would be easy to find. And so you need to then think, well, where are those people? Who are they? What would they like? Who could I talk with that could help these people? So I would flesh out, before you ever touch tech, I would flesh out the idea, what you stand for, who your audience is, what kind of podcast it is. What kind? Are you going to be solo? In which case, you're going to have a lot of material. You need a lot of material. Who will come on your podcast if it's an interview-based one? Who do you know? Who can be your guests? What kind of guests would you like? And then actually getting those guests on. That's probably the biggest time piece of podcasting.
Yeah.
Scheduling guests, getting them on, recording, all of that.
So you've been doing this a while now. So you've, as you said, you've started from zero, and now you have thousands and thousands of followers, and you're doing really well. You're up there, in the #1 slot on the UK, which is amazing. Who has been one of some of your favorite guests on your podcast, and why?
Oh, it's a lovely question. I mean, Susie, you've been on, so obviously you were fantastic.
I know.
Our conversation about slow was fantastic. So I made a choice that in both podcasts we would. I first had a School for Mothers for about a year. I think about just over a year. I wanted to prove that I could keep that up. We now produce 10 podcast episodes a month, which is enormous.
10 a month.
Yeah,
oh my goodness.
A month. Yeah. And that's really big commitment. I mean, I can tell you that. But I needed to know that I could really do this on top of, heading a consultancy that is nothing to do with podcasting and not online. So it's a company in boardroom. So I needed to know that. And I needed to know that it was something that I could really, really, I could do myself, because obviously you need to show up on the interviews and feel comfortable.
Yeah.
So yours was a fantastic one about slow. And we chose to have a 1-syllable word title for every episode. We didn't, if anyone goes and checks, you won't find that in the first, maybe, 10 weeks. And then I suddenly hit on the fact that it needed a hook, and I really liked the idea of a 1-syllable word. So yours fitted really nicely with slow. I would say that I really adored talking with Jane Weicker. I mean, I adore all of them. They're so different. Somebody the other day said the reason that she said yes to an approach. And now we're getting, I mean, every single day I'm approached by people. But I go out specifically to get somebody. Yeah, I'll tell the team, I have now a team, and say, I want X. I actually have a system. We have built a system, a guest management system, and it runs like a machine. And I'll say, right, that's on the list, go and get her. And I would say that Jane Weicker, 83-year-old woman in the States, author, became an author at 80. Her book is about self and soul selfish, it's called. And she talked to me about the vibrancy of being an octogenarian. I can't even say the word, but, you know, being more than 80. And just the inspiration of this woman is incredible. I could go on and on and on. My favorite in School for Fathers that just hits me as we're talking is Eldred Jackson III. He's a man who I urge you to listen to him, because he spent 24 years serving his life sentence. And I've never heard a human being talk so candidly about personal responsibility. And he spent 12 years pushing away his responsibility for his crimes. And he was a gangster. And I had to ask him, you know, all about the details of the gangs, because I'm not in that world.
Yes.
And so he talks in an incredible way. So what I'm finding is that talking with men and women is very different. So different.
In what way? What way?
Well, entering the world of men. People said to me, so who's hosting School for Fathers, Danusia? And I said, well, I will be. I'm doing that. And
Yes.
like, why? Well, don't you need a co-host that's a man? It's like, no, men will talk to me. I'm sure they will. I'm confident they will. It's what I do in my job. You know, it's men. So a lot of men. And so men, I think I've had more men cry on School for Fathers, not because I've made them cry. That's not my objective. But they've cried, they've bared their soul about their love of their children, their love of more than their work, their identity, their struggles, their dreams and desires that we ordinarily don't get to, because we tend to peddle with stereotypes. We all do, of what it means to be a man. And this kind of busts it so firmly that it's a privilege for me to enter that little world with them.
Male vulnerability. Yeah.
Pardon?
Male vulnerability.
Yes, male vulnerability, exactly. And so anyone that thinks that men don't care or don't feel or don't want something different, this is a evidence that men just, you know, may not come to the table and may not wake up in the morning saying these things, but when given space to really bear their, you know, share their hearts, then actually in a safe space, then actually you find out things you didn't really realize. So, and that was what I wanted. So there's something very strong about designing what it is you want, what impact you want. You, not the podcast. What do you as a host want?
I mean, what I'm hearing today is almost using the podcast as a platform, you know, for your message, just as we might use in the olden days would have used our websites. And now podcasting is just another way of doing that. So with writing, sometimes it feels like you have to have a certain kind of skill. Not that I'm saying that you don't need a skill podcasting, and I think you learn that as you go along. But for many people, it can be, you know, if you think, oh, I wasn't very good at English, or I couldn't possibly write something, and you have that barrier. With podcasting as well, I can talk and I can have a conversation, and it may help people, or especially for women, to kind of break through that barrier.
I think so.
I love your message. I love your podcast. But before you go, I just need to ask you one question. In terms of, you know, you're walking the talk, you know, you're running a podcast, you're running business, and you're a mother of 10. If you were going to give advice for mothers out there listening to this, about, because what you do so well is, you know, it's about inspiring us, that you don't have to define yourself or put yourself into a box. So what advice have you got? We're just about to go perhaps into another lockdown. I know you've been locked down with your children and running a business. Any top tips for navigating this 6 months, the winter ahead?
Yeah. One of the biggest things to navigate is connecting and partnering with your children and your partner, husband, wife, the other adults that are in your home, about not being left with everything. So when we realize that we don't have to carry everything, we don't have to do that, and we can ask for help. Women are really not very good at asking for help.
So
They're just not. And when we do that, and when we clear that it is not our job to carry everybody, then we really do ourselves a service. We really do. Otherwise, the problem is we get so burned out, we never get to ourselves. We never do. And it's actually critical that we get to ourselves. In this next stage, we're already pretty tired, let's be honest.
Yeah, we are.
Such a tiring, scary time that we now have to really concentrate on some unreasonable goals for ourselves, not to disappear on ourselves. We can't afford that. If that means building a podcast, that means secretly doing that, or very, very openly and visibly, fantastic. But use your voice. Your voice matters. It really does. And that matters in your home. You have to get your home sorted.
Yeah. I think that is absolutely right. It's, you know, it's being able to ask for help, to ask for the support we need, and, you know, so we can put ourselves in the, you know, maybe it's not first, but at least it's third or second. It would be great if we could put ourselves first, but when it can be difficult when we have screaming children and a dog called Bertie. Danusia, thank you so much for your time today and for your advice around creating a podcast that can have such a positive influence, not only on our own lives and our own passion and our own, you know, giving us a platform to have a real voice out there, but also that you can make a real difference in the world. And thank you for actually, you know, doing the work and being an inspiration for so many of us out there. Thank you for joining me today.
That means a lot. Thank you.
Lots of love, my dear, and I will speak to you very soon. All Danusia's details are below, and do check out her fantastic podcast, The School for Mothers and The School for Fathers, and check out some of the interviews that Danusia's been talking about. Lots of love, and thank you so much for joining me today.